welcome to Primetime Lawmakers, GPB's nightly coverage of the Georgia General Assembly. It's the 7th legislative day of the 2012 session. I'm Scott Slade. Coming up in tonight's program, House Democrats unveiled their legislative agenda. Top on their priority list, repealing HB 87, Georgia's immigration law passed last session. Ethics reform legislation is introduced in the House. That would require a cap on lobbyist gifts to state legislators. We continue our leadership interview series. Tonight, House Minority Leader Stacey Abrams gets to the rationale behind the Democrats' agenda. Georgia's unemployment rate is higher than the national average. Again, I'll talk about that and much more live with State Labor Commissioner Mark Butler. And getting behind the issues, our roundtable of Capitol journalists will be here with me. Tonight, I'll be joined by Tom Crawford of the Georgia Report and Aaron Haynes of the Associated Press. A lot to talk about this evening. All that and more is coming up tonight on Primetime Lawmakers. But first, we go live to the Capitol, where Sandra Parrish says House Democrats laid out their priorities for this session today. Good evening, Sandra.
Good evening, Scott. House Democrats are sponsoring some 20 bills this session, ranging from cracking down on truancy to reducing sales tax on American-made products. And while Senate Democrats unveiled their plan yesterday to do away with the GPA requirement for technical college students receiving the HOPE grant, Representative Stacey Abrams has her own plan in response to changes that were made to the HOPE program last year.
Unfortunately, the change in the GPA to a 3.0 has resulted in more than 4,000 students losing the HOPE grant for technical college. The Restore and Build HOPE Act will change the GPA requirement required for students at technical colleges to a 2.5 to retain the HOPE grant.
Another proposal by Representative Margaret Kaiser would require a commission be established to review state tax credits.
Georgians invest hundreds of millions of dollars annually in more than 30 tax credits. The commission would be required to make a recommendation for each item and whether to continue the policy, modify the policy, or end the policy. Because the House is the chamber of purview for tax legislation, our bill would also require all tax credits to be introduced in the first year of the legislative session and not be eligible for consideration until the second year.
Also on the Democratic agenda, repealing last year's immigration reform law.
HB 87 is a failed attempt at immigration reform that has served to simply cripple the economy of Georgia. It has rippled across the state and has made us the laughingstock in the nation.
Farmers are saying that they're going to scale back. They're going to grow less. We should not be thinking about less. We should be thinking about more. And it goes to the seats, the person that sells the seats, the person that sells the tractor. You know, it's a ripple effect on HB 87.
The bill by Representative Marin would also repeal the requirements that employers with more than 10 employees use the federal E-Verify program for new hires. Democrats plan to hold a public hearing at the Capitol on repealing HB 87 this Thursday at 2:30. The Georgia Alliance for Ethics Reform, which includes several government watchdog groups like the Tea Party and Common Cause Georgia, were on hand today at the Capitol as Representative Tommy Smith filed legislation calling for ethics reform. The bill includes a limit of $100 per event that lobbyists can spend on lawmakers.
And our goal is to make it where the average person out in the state feels like they have as much influence as the lobbyists who walk the hall of the Capitol every day. And so this is a first step.
It also includes a $500 limit on trips, but travel expenses are excluded.
We didn't put a limit on the travel because sometimes we are asked to go to places like Washington, even California, various places in the United States, and you don't know how much the plane fare might be or the Amtrak bill, or if they choose to drive, what that's going to cost. So travel, there's no limit on that, but there is a limit on the amount of money that can be spent once they're there.
The Georgia Alliance for Ethics Reform presented every lawmaker a letter today asking for the bill to pass this session.
We think Georgians need to step up and let them know that this is the cap that they want, that they need to see a limit on lobbyist gifts. This bill does that, and the leadership needs to support it.
If you want a luxury lifestyle, join a country club. But if you want to be a public servant, then do the right thing and sign on to this bill, because this is what the people want. 82% of Republicans, 72% of the general population. I mean, the people have spoken loud and clear.
Democratic Representative Mary Margaret Oliver has joined in co-sponsoring the bill, but so far Smith remains the only Republican on the measure. House Speaker David Ralston has already said this session he does not favor caps on gifts. Reporting live, I'm Sandra Parrish for Primetime Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, Sandra. In other Capitol news today, the House passed HB 683, which was filed in response to a state Supreme Court decision last year that said only an attorney could respond to garnishment orders. Representative Wendell Willard chairs the House Judiciary Committee and explains the need for that legislation.
Since the beginning of garnishment law, businesses and corporations have had the ability to file what is known as a response to a summons of garnishment advising whether or not there is money or properties in their possession that may belong to the defendant. The committee determined that because we described it as an answer in the law, that this is in fact a part of a practice that required a lawyer to do the answer for the garnishee. We had the matter as far as the opinion approved by the Supreme Court, although Justice Namias recognized that this could be modified and changed by legislation. Therefore, the nexus of the bill came as a means of resolving that issue.
The bill passed on a vote of 150 to 20. The State House also passed HB 713. That gives Georgia high school students a 1-year delay before they have to pick a career path. The requirement, which originally passed last year, was scheduled to take effect in the fall. Under the plan, 9th graders would pick one of 17 career pathways, reversing a previous policy that assumed all high school students would attend college. The bill passed 162 to 1. And now goes to the state Senate. Also today at the state capitol, the House Democrats weren't the only ones presenting their agenda. Primetime Lawmakers' Keosha Howard is live at the Capitol with more on that story. Good evening, Keosha.
Good evening, Scott. Senate Democrats today presented their priorities for this session before the Senate. Steve Henson, Senate Minority Leader, lists increasing access to voter registration and taking care of veterans as important issues to the caucus.
There has been certainly a feeling by some of my caucus that we have actually moved in the wrong direction in making voting easier, more open, and more fair. And there's some legitimate debate on that. Many states have online voter registration, and many states have registering to vote and voting on the same day. And they haven't had troubles with fraud or criminal activities. It has made the system more fair and more open to the public. We hope you will look at online voter registration, and we hope you will look at registering to vote and voting, same-day voting. Next, we would like to bring to you some issues on these veterans that are returning. We need to make sure they go to work. We need to make sure that they're integrated back to society. So we have one bill that will give a tax credit to someone who hires a post 9/11 veteran who's been out of work for 6 months or more, give them a $3,500 tax credit on employment taxes to help them get back in the workforce.
Education is also on the Senate Democrats' agenda. Senator Jason Carter spoke about the Hope Scholarship.
The governor's budget calls for Hope to dip into the reserves again this year. We will send out more than we take in again. In fact, the budget calls for the reserves to be spent until they cannot be spent anymore. That means that the reform that was passed did not do what it was supposed to do. We can stick with last year's plan where hope vanishes for most Georgians and we send fewer and fewer students to college, or we can have a plan that is both more fiscally responsible and that ensures that every year we maximize the number of high-achieving students who can afford to go to college.
Senator Carter proposes restoring an income cap to the Hope Scholarship. He says that with a cap of $140,000 per family, 90% of Georgia families would still be eligible for the program. In other news today, the Joint Economic Development Committee heard from various tourism groups from around the state. Chris Comiskey, Commissioner of the Economic Development Department, stresses that the importance of tourism to the state.
Tourism is economic development. In fact, I'll say it again like I said this morning, it's the best return on investment this state has in terms of economic development. These people come here, they leave their money, and we don't have to educate them, we don't have to hospitalize them. This year is going to be about redefining how we do tourism in this state. It has to be a center stage for us. It will be a center stage. We have everything anyone could ask for in this state. We have beaches, we have mountains, we have lakes, we have golf courses. We have everything it should have in this state to attract more and more people. We got Hartsfield International Airport bringing these people here.
And a new international terminal is scheduled to open at Hartsfield-Jackson this spring. Tourism groups say they believe the new terminal will help boost Georgia's tourism revenue. Live from the state capitol, I'm Keosha Howard for Primetime Lawmakers.
Thanks very much, Keosha. In a time of tough budget cuts, public libraries and technical colleges and universities are once again on the chopping block. The Senate Higher Education Committee met today to discuss funding for the Georgia Public Library Service and the Complete College Georgia initiative. Dr. Lamar Vetch stated that Georgia public libraries have faced an $18 million budget cut since 2008. He addressed other issues, including the need for additional broadband capabilities and funding for the interlibrary loan system. University System Chancellor Hank Huckabee and Technical College Commissioner Ronald Jackson discussed how to increase college graduation rates as part of the Complete College Georgia initiative. One strategy mentioned was to implement block scheduling to encourage students to graduate on time. And now more from our exclusive leadership interview with House Minority Leader Stacey Abrams. I began by asking Representative Abrams about a plan called the Georgia Jobs Matter Act, sponsored by House Democrats.
We're going to require that when Georgia issues procurement bids, that we have a jobs impact statement. If we're going to spend millions of taxpayer dollars, those dollars should be going to hire Georgians and not hire folks from outside the state. In addition, we're doing the Georgia Buy American Act, which will give a tax incentive for buying American-made products. We believe that we have to help small businesses today. And so we've got three major pieces. One would suspend E-Verify, which was a part of the failed immigration law, and it would suspend it for small businesses with fewer than 50 employees until 2015, giving them time to really come out from under the recession before we add a new layer of regulation. The other two bills that we are pushing forward is the Georgia Fair Pay Act. That would actually require the state of Georgia to prompt pay any vendors. We have too many vendors who wait for more than 30 to 60 days to receive payment from the state after they've done their work. And last but not least, we're very interested in legislation that will allow healthcare relief. We know that small businesses are one of the primary providers of healthcare services or healthcare funding for their employees. And so we're going to push for healthcare exchanges.
Well, let's move on to education. You've said we have deeply disinvested from education. We have to recognize that we have to spend more on certain children to help them. What did you mean by that? How would you do it, and who would you help?
Part of education reform has to look at the needs of the actual child. We have this idea of the sort of prototypical student who needs exactly X amount of dollars, and that's not true. But a larger concern is what are the pieces that are making it difficult for that child to learn? On the elementary and pre-K level, we're going to look at a study committee to really evaluate pre-K. Do we put enough money into the program? Do we cover the right ages? And do we have the right guidelines? In addition, we're going to look at things like cyberbullying and anti-truancy legislation. Parents should be front and center in making certain that their children are protected and that they're able to learn. And the largest piece of that is the Parent Protection Act. We keep demanding parent accountability, but in the state of Georgia, you can be fired if you leave to go to a parent conference or to take your child to the doctor.
Can you support the energy sales tax exemption for manufacturers that Governor Deal is suggesting?
I support absolutely the removal of a tax on inputs. I think it's good business sense. The challenge is not whether we should do it, it's how do we do it. Tax reform requires that if you're going to take money out of our coffers, we have to put it back in somewhere else, or we have to cut a program. And Georgia has cut itself to the bone.
And what about tax collections? Is there a lot of money being left on the table?
Well, one of the things we're going to push is tax accountability, and that goes under our shared responsibility prong. We believe that it's important to have an independent council that evaluates all of the tax credits, tax abatements, and tax programs that we have in place. There are more than 31 different tax credits that we have on the books today. Some of them are used, some of them are not, but there is no uniform way to evaluate their utility. We believe that an annual evaluation is essential if we want to make good choices about how we're investing taxpayer dollars.
Let's talk about the Hope Scholarship for just a moment. How do you feel about a means test, an income cap on who can be eligible for Hope Scholarships, and how much should it be?
Unfortunately, we've had 4,200 students who lost the Hope grant in technical college because they couldn't maintain a 3.0. Well, we know that technical college is a very different decision, and we believe that that grade point average should be lowered to 2.5. Hope is running out, and we're going to have to evaluate how we allocate these funds. I think there are conversations to be had about generating new revenue. There are conversations to be had about a means test and about a cap. But any decision we make needs to look at the totality of educational needs in our state, not simply looking at a snapshot of today, but what will our students look like 10 years, 15, 20 years from now?
House Minority Leader Stacey Abrams, Democrat from District 84 in Atlanta. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The Georgia Department of Transportation says it wants to get what it paid for. In a presentation before the House Transportation Committee today, DOT Commissioner Keith Golden said the big issue that's set their eyes on for this legislative session is getting their funding back. The DOT wants funds that were originally put away for programs no longer being used to be directed to current transportation programs. Commissioner Golden said that the original goal for 13 miles of HOT lanes in I-85 northeast of Atlanta was not to solve the traffic problem, but to serve as a mobility option for commuters. The commissioner also talked about the importance of airports in communities, namely jobs and $62.6 billion as a boost to Georgia's economy. Ask any man on the street what worries him today, and you're likely to hear jobs in the economy. It's on the minds of millions of Americans. No doubt President Obama will devote a sizable portion of the State of the Union address tonight to that very topic. Georgians are not immune to these concerns. Statistics supplied by the Georgia Department of Labor show that between December 2010 in December 2011, Georgia lost 14,000 jobs. That's 0.4%. Georgia's unemployment in December was higher than the nation's 9.7%. The country as a whole is at 8.5%. Interestingly, first-time filers for unemployment benefits in Georgia went down 15.8% over that one-year period. Over 50% of unemployed Georgians are considered long-term unemployed. That is, they've been unemployed for more than 27 weeks. The Georgia Department of Labor is responsible for serving those Georgians who are looking for work and applying for unemployment benefits. And I'm now joined by State Labor Commissioner Mark Butler. It's great to have you in primetime Lawmakers, Commissioner.
Well, it's good to be here, Scott.
And obviously that will be a hot topic for the President tonight, anyone else who's concerned about our economy. And the President's expected to call this a make-or-break moment for the middle class in his speech tonight. It's going to be hard to work your way into the middle class if you're not trained to do something that people want to pay you for.
That is true.
And I want to ask you, knowing what you know about the jobs that are coming to Georgia, the jobs that are going unfilled, what would you tell a kid about to graduate from high school, what he or she should be training for to have a good chance of getting a decent job?
Well, right now, the industries that we're seeing the most interest in be anything with science, technology, engineering. Mathematics is always a big thing. However, one area that doesn't seem to get a lot of coverage and talk about has to do in the skilled trades. We get a lot of interest across Georgia for things like welders, high-tech welding, machinists, industrial electricians, all those type of trades. The demand for those trades have gone up significantly over the last few years, and these are well-paying jobs.
We're hearing thousands of jobs, skilled jobs are going unfilled, a lot of them in Metro Atlanta. Is that a good number, thousands every year?
Well, just for example, we received a survey that was given to us by the Technology Association of Georgia, where they surveyed all of their Georgia partners, and when they sent it back, they said they had over 5,000 job openings in that sector that they could not fill right now. So, one of the issues we're dealing with right now is a skills gap across Georgia. We're seeing a lot of jobs come opening. We're having a hard time filling those jobs. The welding was one of the things that really surprised us right off the bat. Soon after we got into office, we went around, traveled, and talked to several employers, and there just seemed to be a theme that came up. A lot of jobs in welding were needed all over Georgia. And now we're seeing that it's actually spread across the southeast. We're seeing inquiries from Louisiana, Mississippi, in Georgia looking for welders. Of course, we can't send them any because we can't supply all the jobs that we have here.
How about that? Are you hearing from employers that really the number one concern is an educated workforce? In other words, a skill-ready workforce?
Skilled workforce. I mean, I think gone are the days where you need large numbers of unskilled laborers. Matter of fact, the other day, we were talking to a company that's warehousing, and most people would think in the past that a warehouse job would be unskilled labor. That is not true nowadays. With automation, robotics, new systems that go in warehousing, it's very technical in nature, and they need skilled people to fill those jobs. And they're a lot better paying jobs now than they were in the past.
I had a graphic just a moment ago talking about the long-term unemployed in Georgia. Over 50% of unemployed Georgians have been out of work for more than 27 weeks. Why is that so persistent in Georgia, the long-term unemployment?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with, you have to go back and look at when the recession started, what caused the depth of the recession, especially here in Georgia, and that was construction. We were at the height of one of the greatest growth spurts in the history of this state. and construction was at one of its biggest booms. And when the economy collapsed, construction collapsed in a dramatic fashion. You're talking a loss of over 85,000 jobs in that industry alone. And then you look at the industries that followed right behind construction and losses, and you talk about manufacturing, that's connected to construction. And then you start talking about the losses in the financial sector, that's connected to construction. Retail trade connected to construction. Just a domino effect.
Is there any practical way to even say those construction jobs will come back? I mean, is there even a timeline to predict when that might happen, or should we start thinking about training to do something else?
Well, here's the thing about that. Last month, we actually saw some of the first positive numbers as far as hiring in December for construction since 2003. First time we've seen hiring in a positive way since 2003 in construction in the month of December. We've seen some ups and downs, but we are starting to see some signs of life in construction now. Most of us would have thought that it might have taken another year to see any type of positive movement, but we're starting to see some signs. Matter of fact, we even saw a survey recently of construction firms around Georgia, and roughly only 5% were looking to lay off. Whereas somewhere around the neighborhood of 30% were actually thinking about hiring this next year. That's a very good sign for Georgia because of how construction affects so many other industries.
Yeah, and you say it ripples down through 3 or 4 industries.
Oh, easily, and really more than that if you really want to think about it.
Let's take a look at a map very quick. We have a statewide map showing unemployment county to county, and it's pretty easy to see that the counties that are colored yellow have 10% or greater unemployment. The ones that aren't colored at all, the whites, the white counties, less than 8%. Those are where apparently pockets, high density jobs are. Is there any pattern to that? For instance, over by the Athens, Oconee County area, Clark County area, there seems to be very perennially high employment there.
Well, Athens is definitely one of the strong pockets in Georgia for jobs due to UGA in that area. But also any area around our military bases right now. Columbus is a really great area. They're doing quite well. Warner Robins, and obviously around Savannah and the ports. I mean, we cannot stress enough at how important the ports are to the state of Georgia and its economic growth. A lot of times that's where a lot of the job growth is centering around right now and is staying strong. I mean, like one of the sectors that we have seen continue to stay strong all the way through the recession. Actually, it's one of the groups that has had consistent job growth throughout the entire recession is the medical field and the education. Those residency slots, if they opened up, will certainly help things a lot. Doctors open offices and hire people if they stay. One quick thing here, the Unemployment Trust Fund, $720 million is what Georgia owes. It's a hugely complicated subject. How do we pay that money back to the federal government? Well, that's not really a quick thing, as you just said. It's actually a very complicated thing. We're working right now with the governor's office and the leaders in the House and Senate and moving forward with a plan that we're putting together right now. We have to get that paid back quickly. It's not just the fact of having the loan, but the federal government has kind of got us tied down to some really unreasonable terms. If you don't pay it back by a certain amount, the federal government starts increasing their unemployment tax on our businesses. On top of that, the interest rate that they're charging the state of Georgia is almost highway robbery. I mean, you lock them right at 4%. The Fed is lending to other banks at less than 1% right now, but yet they're lending money to us at 4%. Doesn't seem right, does it? No, it doesn't seem right. We could use a little relief on that, but it's an economic development issue. We understand it, and the longer we ignore this problem, the worse it's going to get for Georgia employers, and we're being proactive, looking towards solutions to get that money paid back as quickly as possible. And as bad as $720 million sounds for Georgia, it's much worse in other southern states. What North Carolina's in for more than $2 billion, aren't they? Right, which is one of our main competitors when it comes to economic development. So I'm glad I'm not in their shoes. It's great to have you here. Let's check back with you during the session, and we'll get back on your legislative agenda, too. Look forward to it. Commissioner Mark Butler, thanks for joining us this evening. We've got to take a short break on Primetime Lawmakers, so don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll be going in depth and behind the issues under the Gold Dome. Tom Crawford, editor of the Georgia Report, and Aaron Haynes from the Associated Press in Atlanta. This is the fun part. Stay with us. Welcome back to Primetime Lawmakers. The session continues and developments ensue. Today saw some legislators announcing their intentions to repeal HB 87, Georgia's immigration law. Also, long-rumored legislation to place a cap on lobbyist gifts to lawmakers was filed in the House. Joining me now to analyze these important issues and many more is Erin Haynes. She's a reporter for the Associated Press, has been covering Georgia for 7 years. And Tom Crawford, the editor of the Georgia Report. Tom's been covering Georgia politics for 3 decades and is a regular here on Lawmakers and Primetime Politics. It's great to have you with us here.
Thanks for having us.
Here we are moving along into the session here. And Erin, if anything, the gauntlet was thrown down on Hope Scholarships today.
Yes, it appears that the legislature may be just 1 year after overhauling the Hope Scholarship, may be coming back to revisit that issue. Democrats are saying that the Hope Scholarship remains in crisis. They are calling for the cap to return for eligible family income
cap,
on the Hope Scholarship. And they're also calling for maybe a change to the newly created Zell Miller Scholarship, named after the program's patriarch, obviously former Governor Zell Miller. Republicans have also proposed some legislation related to the Hope Scholarship. Specifically, they are proposing that the any unclaimed monies from the lottery, which of course funds the Hope Scholarship, be used to fund Hope instead of return to that lottery's general pool.
Is there a lot of enthusiasm for an income cap for the Hope Scholarship outside of the Democratic caucus?
Gotta say, you know, from talking to lawmakers today, does not seem to be much enthusiasm for bringing that cap back. It was obviously very popular to just, you know, make it available to everybody, and now the thought is that we need to keep it merit-based.
Okay.
The Lieutenant Governor saying as late as last week that Hope was never intended to be an entitlement program, so that's kind of the language that you're hearing from Republicans about.
Jobs and economy, Tom Crawford, anything happening under the Gold Dome right now that may bear on that?
A bill to establish a state government venture capital fund, Scott, that would go to provide investment assistance for small companies. Came out of committee today, and it looks like it will be going to the House floor pretty soon for a vote. Seems to be a pretty popular idea. The feeling is we're losing a lot of the small startup companies to other states because we don't have enough venture capital to invest in them, keep them going. They're thinking if they can build up this $200 million state fund, we can keep them here, provide more jobs for folks. So that appears to be on a pretty fast track right now.
HB 87 repealing, is that going anywhere, or will we see some tinkering with the employee level for E-Verify?
The immigration bill you're talking about, I don't think we're going to see any major repeal of it. They may make some very small changes here and there, but there does not seem to be much of an appetite to go back and revisit that issue again.
Ethics legislation, Aaron, will there be an appetite for doing even a $100 cap on individual gifts to lawmakers?
Not sure exactly what they're going to do on ethics legislation, but it appears that maybe that they're willing to do something. We had some legislation filed, you know, for things as minor as changing the name of the Ethics Commission. As you know, it has a, you know, kind of lengthy and cumbersome name right now. Changing it back to the State Ethics Commission to maybe something, revisiting that, you know, capping the gifts to lawmakers, which is something that voters have signaled that they may have an appetite for.
And tax reform, finally, is there any sign that that's going to move forward at all?
Well, the one thing that does seem to be having a consensus in terms of tax reform is the repeal of the energy tax for manufacturers. That's something that Georgia says they need to make them more competitive with surrounding states, which have already eliminated that tax for their manufacturers.
We'll watch to see if that even gets past the starting gate. Thanks very much for joining us. Let's get you back on here. There'll be a lot happening. Coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, Chief Justice Carol Hunstein of the Supreme Court of Georgia delivers the State of the Judiciary address to a special joint session. We'll have the highlights. We'll bring you more about the budget with special guest Alan Essig from Georgia Budget Policy Institute and Kelly McCutcheon, the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. All that and more tomorrow on Primetime Lawmakers. You can see a repeat of this broadcast tomorrow morning at 5:30. And later tonight over in GPB Knowledge, special PBS NewsHour coverage of President Obama's State of the Union address. That's at 9 o'clock tonight on GPB Knowledge. Next on GPB, it's Georgia Outdoors. Hope you stay tuned for that. We'll see you tomorrow night on Primetime Lawmakers.
This is a GPB original production.